I can't walk straight. What did you do to me? Alien woman exclaimed. The crystalline assembly hall hummed with 1,000 silent voices. Pete Ryder stood at attention behind Ambassador Vexer's chair, his shoulders squared, his breathing controlled. The summit chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, walls of living crystal that pulsed with soft bioluminescence, reflecting the thoughts of the telepathic delegates in ripples of color. To Pete, it looked like standing inside a kaleidoscope. To the others, it was a symphony of shared consciousness. He hated it. Not the beauty, the silence, the unnatural, suffocating silence of a room full of beings who never spoke aloud. Their mouths didn't move. Their faces barely shifted. Yet agreements were reached, insults exchanged, alliances forged, all in the space between heartbeats. Pete's heartbeat, unfortunately, was not subtle. He'd been briefed extensively before this assignment. The Vunari, like most of the species at the Interstellar Accord, communicated primarily through telepathy, a gentle, whisper-soft touching of minds. Humans, with their dense neural architecture and high-energy biology, were the psychic equivalent of a jet engine at a string quartet. His mere presence was considered disruptive, rude even, which was exactly why he'd been assigned here. Where others saw a diplomatic liability, the security director saw an asset. A human bodyguard couldn't have his mind read, couldn't be influenced by psychic manipulation, and most importantly, was too loud for most assassins to approach without announcing themselves. Pete was a living alarm system, and he knew it. He watched Vexera from his post, 3 regulation feet behind her chair. The Vunari diplomat sat with perfect posture, her deep blue skin seeming to absorb the ambient light rather than reflect it. Her silver hair, not quite hair, more like living filaments, cascaded down her back in a waterfall of metallic threads that shifted with electromagnetic currents he couldn't see. She wore formal robes of midnight blue cut to emphasize the elegant lines of her frame. In the 2 weeks he'd been assigned to her, she'd spoken to him exactly 4 times, always tersely, always with a slight curl of distaste at her lips, as if his very existence offended her sensibilities. Fair enough. He wasn't here to make friends. The High Arbiter, a towering creature of obsidian skin and 4 golden eyes, gestured with one of its 6 arms. The crystal walls pulsed in response, and Pete felt, rather than heard, the shift in the room's energy. Something was being decided, something important. Vexera leaned forward slightly. Her long fingers, 7 on each hand he'd counted, pressed against the stone table before her. The gesture looked casual, but Pete had learned to read her body language. Her shoulders were too tight. Her breathing, usually slow and measured, had quickened. She was stressed. Pete's eyes swept the chamber. 43 delegates representing 22 species, 12 security personnel stationed at the exits. The overhead gallery held another 30 observers behind force fields. Standard configuration. Nothing appeared out of place. So why was his skin prickling? Years of combat training had honed his instincts to a razor's edge. Right now, those instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Vexera's fingers trembled. It was minute, barely perceptible, but Pete caught it. Then her silver hair stopped moving completely. The metallic strands hung limp and lifeless, no longer responding to the room's electromagnetic fields. Pete moved before conscious thought. The Vunari maintained a strict 3-foot personal buffer. Physical contact was considered barbaric, a vestigial remnant of their pre-telepathic past. Touching a Vunari diplomat without explicit permission could trigger an interstellar incident. Pete didn't care. He closed the distance in 2 strides, catching Vexera as she toppled backward. Her body was cold, shockingly cold, like holding a statue carved from ice. Her eyes were open but unseeing, pupils dilated to pinpoints. Her lips, normally a darker shade of purple-blue, had gone nearly white. The room exploded into chaos, not audible chaos that would have been easier to process. Instead, Pete felt a sudden pressure against his skull, like invisible hands trying to pry open his mind. The crystal walls blazed with violent reds and oranges, colors that Pete's briefing materials had identified as alarm and outrage. Release her immediately. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing his ears entirely and slamming directly into his consciousness. Pete's jaw clenched. Telepathic projection. He hated that even more than the silence. "She's in medical distress," Pete said, his voice cutting through the psychic den like a blade through silk. The sound of his actual spoken words caused several delegates to flinch. "I'm moving her to the medical bay." "You dare?" "Yeah, I dare." Pete shifted Vexira's weight in his arms, supporting her head against his shoulder. Through his uniform, he could feel how cold she was. Too cold. Wrong. "You want to file a diplomatic complaint? Get in line. Right now, I've got a job to do." He turned toward the nearest exit, and that's when he felt it. A pulse, not from the room from Vexira. It started where her temple pressed against his neck. A tiny flutter like a moth's wing. Then it spread, following the contact points where his hands supported her back and legs. Wherever his body touched hers, he felt an answering rhythm. Faint, but growing stronger. Her heartbeat. He was feeling her heartbeat through her skin. No, it was more than that. He was feeling her entire nervous system struggling to restart like an engine turning over but failing to catch. And somehow, impossibly, his own heartbeat was providing a counter-rhythm, a template for hers to follow. The crystal walls shifted to deep purple confusion as the other delegates registered what was happening. Pete didn't stop moving. He hit the exit at a dead run, ignoring the spindly physician who tried to intercept him in the corridor. The alien wore a medical smock covered in instruments Pete didn't recognize and smelled like ozone. "You cannot the protocols." "Where's the secure medical bay?" Pete demanded. "But you are human. Your biology is incompatible." "I know. Don't care. Where?" The physician's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. A gesture Pete had learned meant distress, but the alien must have seen something in Pete's expression, or perhaps simply recognized the futility of argument because it gestured down the corridor with one trembling appendage. "Subley 3, Chamber 7. But I must insist." Pete was already moving. The medical bay was a circular room with walls of the same living crystal as the assembly hall, currently pulsing a soft, neutral blue. Pete kicked the door panel, and it slid shut behind him with a hiss of pressurization. He carried Vexira to the central examination platform, a hovering slab of what looked like polished obsidian, and laid her down gently. Her eyes were still open, still unseeing. "Come on," Pete muttered, pressing 2 fingers against the side of her neck. The Vunari briefing had identified the location of their primary cardiac organ, slightly offset from where a human's would be, but close enough. "Come on, Ambassador, don't do this." Nothing. Her pulse was there, but weak, thready, like it was giving up. Pete's mind raced. He'd completed the mandatory xenobiology training, but it had focused on the basics: respiratory systems, circulatory structures, what not to feed various species. Nothing about this. Nothing about a complete neural shutdown. But he remembered something one of the instructors had mentioned in passing. The Vunari were highly sensitive to vibrations. Their entire sensory system was built around detecting and interpreting subtle electromagnetic and physical frequencies. That's why they needed the personal buffer. Too much sensory input could overload them. What if the opposite was true? What if Vexer wasn't overloaded but starved? Pete pressed his palm flat against her chest, just above where her heart should be. The reaction was immediate. Vexira's entire body arched off the table, every muscle going rigid. Her silver hair snapped outward like she'd been struck by lightning, each strand standing on end. Her eyes rolled back, showing only the whites, except they weren't white. They were a pale, luminescent blue. Then she gasped. It was the most human sound Pete had ever heard from her, raw and desperate and alive. Her back remained arched, held in that impossible curve by muscles locked in titanic contraction. Her hands clawed at the air, fingers spled. Pete didn't move his hand. He could feel it now, more clearly than before, the resonance between his body and hers. His heartbeat, strong and steady at 70 beats per minute, was creating a rhythmic pressure wave through his palm, and Vexira's nervous system was grabbing onto it like a drowning person clutching a lifeline. "That's it," Pete said softly. "Follow the rhythm. Follow me back." Her pupils contracted, focusing, unfocusing, focusing again, like a camera lens, struggling to find the right depth. Then her gaze locked onto his face. Pete had been studied by many species during his service. He'd been analyzed, categorized, and evaluated by beings far more intelligent than himself. But he'd never been looked at the way Vexera was looking at him now, like he was the only real thing in the universe. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Pete leaned closer, his hand still pressed against her chest. What did her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse and broken. "What did you just breathe?" Pete said, "You're safe. I've got you. I can't." She tried to sit up and failed, her body refusing to obey her commands. Her silver hair fell across her face, no longer standing on end, but not quite moving naturally either. "I can't walk straight." "What did you do to me?" Pete frowned. "You haven't tried to walk yet? I can feel it. My legs." She looked down at herself, then back at him. Confusion and something else. Something that looked almost like fear in her dark eyes. "Your presence, it's so loud, so heavy. I can't find my own rhythm anymore. It's all yours. All you." The door hissed open. The spindly physician from before entered, followed by two Vunari in medical whites, and unfortunately, the High Arbiter itself. The massive alien had to duck to fit through the doorway, its obsidian skin seeming to absorb all light that touched it. "Explain yourself, human," the Arbiter said, its voice resonating directly in Pete's skull with enough force to make his teeth ache. Pete kept his hand where it was. She was dying. "I stabilized her by violating every medical protocol. By saving her life, Pete met two of the Arbiter's 4 golden eyes. With respect, your protocols were about to leave you with a corpse. I'm not apologizing for doing my job." The spindly physician rushed forward, instruments emerging from its smock like a porcupine's quills. It waved something that hummed and clicked over Vixer's prone form, then jerked back as if burned. "Impossible," it breathed. "Her neural pathways they're recalibrating, synchronizing to an external frequency." It turned its bulbous head toward Pete. "Your frequency. You're functioning as a pacemaker, not for her heart, for her entire nervous system." "Is that bad?" Pete asked. "Bad? It's never been documented. Human biology is far too divergent. The resonance should be causing rejection, neural static, sensory hemorrhaging. Instead, she's the physician's 4 eyes widened further. She's stabilizing. You're actually stabilizing her." The High Arbiter leaned down, 2 of its 6 arms folded across its chest. "This is highly irregular." "She's alive," Pete said flatly. "That's regular enough for me. Release her." "No." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The crystal walls flashed red anger, then settled into an ominous purple. "You refuse a direct order?" the Arbiter asked, its voice dangerously soft. "I refuse to kill her," Pete corrected. "That's what'll happen if I let go right now. Her nervous system is using mine as a template. Remove the template before she's stable." And he looked down at Vexera, who was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'm not doing that." One of the Vunari physicians stepped forward, speaking for the first time. Its voice was crystalline, like wind chimes. "The human is correct. Look at her neural scan. She's in a state of complete systemic failure, a sensory freeze. Someone triggered a psychic dampening field during the summit, targeting her specifically. Without external stimulation, her nervous system will cascade into full shutdown within hours." "Can you provide that stimulation?" the Orbiter asked. The Vunari physician hesitated. "Not of this intensity. Human neural activity is unique, high frequency, high amplitude, and completely non-psychic. It's providing a baseline that telepathic stimulation cannot match. If we remove him now," it trailed off, the implication clear. Pete felt Vexera's hand close around his wrist. Her grip was weak, but her fingers were warming against his skin. She pulled gently, trying to bring his hand closer. When he didn't resist, she guided his palm from her chest to her throat, pressing it against the side of her neck. The effect was immediate. Her eyes fluttered closed, and a shudder ran through her entire body. Not a seizure. Something else. Something that looked almost like relief. "Don't," she whispered, her voice still rough. "Don't let them make you stop." The Arbiter's 4 eyes studied them for a long moment. Then it straightened, its massive frame once again dominating the room. "Very well. The human will remain with Ambassador Vexera until she is stable. However," it added, turning those golden eyes on Pete, "you will be monitored constantly. Any deviation from medical necessity will result in immediate removal and possible criminal charges. Do you understand? Crystal clear, Pete said. And you, Ambassador? The arbiter's voice softened slightly. Do you consent to this arrangement? Vexer's eyes opened, meeting Pete's gaze for a heartbeat before shifting to the orbiter. I do. The human stays. The orbiter nodded once, then swept from the room, its robes trailing behind it like shadows. The physicians lingered a moment longer, taking readings and murmuring among themselves in their chiming language. Then they too departed, leaving Pete alone with Vexera in the softly glowing medical bay. For several long minutes, neither of them spoke. Finally, Vexera broke the silence. You can hear it, can't you? My heartbeat. Pete nodded. Through your skin. It's loud. That's what humans feel like to us, she said softly. Every moment of every day, like standing next to a drum that never stops beating. Like trying to think while someone shouts in your ear. She paused. It's considered torture being near a human for more than a few minutes. Sorry, Pete said, meaning it. Don't be. She turned her head to look at him fully, and Pete was struck again by the alienness of her, the two large eyes, the bone structure that was almost but not quite human, the skin that seemed to drink in light right now. That drum is the only thing keeping me alive. And she hesitated. It's not unpleasant. Pete raised an eyebrow. Not unpleasant. The first thing I felt when I woke was your hand. The weight of it. The heat. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. I've spent my entire life avoiding physical sensation. We all have, and now I'm drowning in it, and I should hate it. But She closed her eyes. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you, Pete said firmly. You're injured. Your body is responding to treatment. That's all, is it? She opened her eyes again, and this time Pete saw something in them that made his chest tighten. Because it feels like more than that. It feels like I'm being rewritten. Before Pete could respond, his commune chirped. He pulled it from his belt with his free hand. His other was still pressed against Vexera's throat and read the message scrolling across the screen. Security Directive. Ambassador Vexera to be relocated to high-security private suite. Sublevel 7. Threat assessment indicates continued psychic assault attempts likely. Human bodyguard authorized to remain in close proximity for duration of crisis. All standard protocols suspended. Pete looked up to find Vexera watching him. We're moving, he said. Somewhere safer. Will you? She stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Will you stay with me? That's the job, Ambassador. Vexera, she said softly. When it's just us, call me Vexera. Pete nodded slowly. Then, yeah, Vexera, I'll stay. As he helped her sit up, feeling the way her body trembled with the effort, the way she leaned into him for support. Pete couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just shifted. Not just in her, but in him, too. The drum was beating, and for the first time in his life, someone was dancing to its rhythm. The private suite on Sublevel 7 was built for security, not comfort. Pete swept the room with trained eyes as he helped Verera through the doorway. 3 Endurax steel walls reinforced with energy-dampening fields. No windows, of course not. 7 levels underground, but the ceiling panels glowed with soft, adjustable bioluminescence. A single large bed dominated the center space, surrounded by medical monitoring equipment that hummed quietly. A small sitting area, a sealed refreshment unit, an attached hygiene chamber, a cage essentially, but a very secure cage. Will this do? Pete asked, guiding Vexera toward the bed. She didn't answer immediately. Her legs were shaking, barely supporting her weight, even with his arm around her waist. She tried to walk unaided from the medical bay to the transport pod, had managed 3 steps before her knees buckled. The look of shock on her face, the dawning realization that her own body had betrayed her, had been difficult to watch. Pete had caught her, of course. He was getting good at that. It's fine, she said finally, her voice strained. Better than fine. There's a bed. You should rest. I don't think rest is what I need. She looked up at him, and Pete was struck again by how her pupils dilated when she met his gaze like staring into the sun. She'd said earlier, too bright and too intense. The physician said, I need constant external stimulation. That means I stay close, Pete finished. I understand. He helped her sit on the edge of the bed, then moved to check the room's security systems. The control panel beside the door showed all seals active, all defensive measures online. Anyone trying to break in would have a very bad day. Pete, he turned. Vexera was still sitting where he'd left her, but her hands were gripping the edge of the bed so hard her knuckles had gone pale purple. "I can feel you across the room," she said, and there was something almost accusatory in her tone. "Your heartbeat, your breathing, the electrical impulses in your nervous system. They're so loud I can barely think. And when you move farther away, I start to feel cold again, distant, like I'm floating away from myself." Pete crossed back to her in 3 strides. "What do you need?" She looked at him for a long moment, and he watched her internal struggle play out across her face. Pride wearing with necessity, dignity, fighting, desperation. Necessity won. "Touch me," she said quietly, "like before. Please." Pete knelt in front of her, bringing them to eye level. "Where? Anywhere. Everywhere. I don't." She broke off, frustrated. "I don't know. My people don't do this. We don't have the vocabulary for it. I just know that when you're touching me, I feel solid, real, and when you're not, I feel like I'm disappearing." Pete reached up slowly, telegraphing his movements, and placed his palm against the side of her neck, the same position as before. Her pulse jumped under his fingers, rapid and thready, then began to slow, synchronizing with his own. Vexer's eyes closed. "Yes, like that. Just like that." "More," she breathed. "I need more." Pete's training had covered many scenarios: combat medicine, hostage negotiation, high-threat extractions. What it had not covered was this: how to be a living life support system for an alien diplomat whose entire sensory system was rewiring itself around his presence. He was going to have to improvise. "Okay," he said softly. "I'm going to try something. Tell me if it's too much." He moved his other hand to her shoulder, then slid it slowly down her back, following the curve of her spine. Through the thin material of her diplomatic robes, he could feel the knobs of her vertebrae, similar to human structure, but more delicate, like bird bones. Vexera gasped. Pete froze. Too much? No. Her eyes snapped open, pupils blown wide. Not enough. "Your hand, it's like a line of fire down my back. I can feel every fingerprint, every ridge of your palm." "It's—" She shook her head, struggling for words. "How do you live like this? How do you function with this much sensation?" "You get used to it," Pete said. "Humans are built for physical contact. We need it. Actually, babies will fail to thrive without it." "We're the opposite," Vexera murmured. "We spend our whole lives avoiding touch, building shields against sensation." "And now," she leaned forward, bringing her forehead to rest against his collarbone. "Now, I can't imagine ever going back." Pete could feel her breathing quick and shallow and the heat building where their bodies made contact. Not heat from her, but from him. His body temperature was nearly 8 degrees higher than hers, and the warmth was transferring through cloth and skin, creating a feedback loop of sensation. The spindly physician had been right to be concerned. This was unprecedented territory. "The physician mentioned something before," Pete said, keeping his voice level and professional even as his hands remained in place. "A sensory freeze. Said it was deliberate. An attack." Vexera nodded against his chest. "I felt it happen during the vote on the mining rights. Someone broadcast a psychic dampener directly into my mind. It was like having every sense shut off at once. No sight, no sound, no telepathy, just void. I was falling into nothing, and I couldn't stop it. Who would do that? Someone who wants the Azure hegemony to withdraw from the Accord. Someone who knew that killing me outright would trigger a war, but discrediting me, making me appear unstable, unfit, would achieve the same goal." Her hands came up to grip his uniform shirt, fingers tangling in the fabric, and it would have worked. "By the time they discovered what had happened, I would have been too far gone to recover. A tragic accident, a diplomatic casualty. Except I grabbed you. Except you grabbed me," she echoed, "and your human loudness cut through the dampening field like a knife. Gave my nervous system something to hold on to when everything else was empty." She tilted her head back to look at him. "You saved my life with your presence alone. No weapons, no shields, just you." Pete didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Instead, he did what he'd been trained to do. He assessed the situation and adapted. The physician said, "You need constant stimulation." He said, "That means I need to maintain contact, but I also need to secure the room, monitor for threats, and at some point, I need to sleep." He frowned. "This is going to get complicated." "I have a solution," Vexura said, "but you're not going to like it. Try me." She straightened, putting a few inches of distance between them. Pete felt her pulse stutter under his fingers, then stabilize as she forced herself to focus. "The bed is large enough for both of us," she said, her tone carefully formal, the diplomat reasserting herself. "If we share it, you would be close enough to provide the stimulation I need while still being able to rest. The monitoring equipment will alert us to any threats. It's the most efficient solution." Pete considered this. She was right. It was efficient. It also crossed about 17 different professional boundaries. But given that he was already functioning as her personal nervous system, those boundaries seemed somewhat moot. "All right," he said, "but ground rules. You tell me immediately if something's uncomfortable. If the contact is too much or not enough or just wrong, you speak up. Understood?" "Understood. And this stays medical," Pete continued. "I'm here because you need me here, not for any other reason." Something flickered across Vexer's face. Disappointment, maybe, or relief. Of course, medical necessity only. Pete nodded, then stood and began removing his uniform jacket. He felt Vera's eyes tracking the movement, watching as he revealed the dark shirt beneath the way it clung to his frame. "You're very—" she paused. "Dense your muscles. They're packed so tightly." "High-gravity evolution," Pete said, folding the jacket and setting it aside. "Earth's gravity is nearly twice what most species consider standard. Humans are built to handle it. And the heat," she gestured vaguely at him. "I can feel it from here, like standing near a furnace. Higher metabolism. We burn a lot of energy just existing." He moved to the bed, then paused. "How do you want to do this?" Vexera stood carefully, her legs still unsteady. She reached for the fastening of her diplomatic robes, then stopped, her fingers hesitating at the clasp. "I should," she swallowed. "These robes are ceremonial, heavy, not appropriate for sleeping. But the undergarments are." She trailed off, color rising in her cheeks, a deeper purple against her blue skin. "I'll turn around," Pete said simply. "Tell me when you're ready." He did, focusing on the security readouts while trying very hard not to think about what was happening behind him. The soft rustle of fabric, the quiet intake of breath, the slight stumble and muttered curse as she struggled with balance. "Ready," Vexera said finally. Pete turned back. She'd changed into what looked like a thin sleep shift, pale silver like her hair. It left her arms and most of her legs bare, and Pete could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescent markings along her skin, natural tattoos that pulsed faintly with her heartbeat. She looked vulnerable, beautiful, and deeply uncomfortable with being seen. "The bed," Pete said gently, gesturing. "Let's get you settled." Vexera climbed onto the bed with visible effort, her movements stiff and uncertain. Pete followed, maintaining a careful distance as they both arranged themselves on top of the covers. "How do you want me to?" Pete began. "Your back," Vexera interrupted. "Press your back against mine. That way, we maintain contact." But she gestured helplessly. "It's less forward." Pete nodded and rolled onto his side, presenting his back to her. After a moment, he felt her shift. Then the length of her spine pressed against his. The reaction was instant and profound. Vexera made a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a moan, and her entire body went rigid against him. Pete could feel every vertebrae in her back, every rapid breath, every stuttering heartbeat. "Talk to me," he said. "What are you feeling?" "Everything," she whispered. "I'm feeling everything. Your heat is soaking through my skin, your heartbeat. I can feel it in my own chest like a second pulse. The electrical currents in your nervous system are creating interference patterns with mine. It's overwhelming. It's—" She pressed harder against him. "It's perfect." Pete felt her begin to relax, muscle by muscle. Her breathing slowed, deepening. Her heartbeat, which had been racing, began to find a steady rhythm, not quite matching his, but harmonizing with it, like two drums playing complementary beats. "Better?" he asked. "Yes, but Pete." "Yeah, Don't move away even in your sleep. Promise me. He should have said that he couldn't promise that he moved in his sleep like everyone else. That maintaining contact for hours would be difficult, if not impossible. Instead, he said, I promise, and felt her entire body relax against him in relief. They lay there in silence for a time, and Pete found himself hyper-aware of every point of contact, shoulder blades, spine, the backs of their legs. His body heat was creating a warm pocket between them, and he could feel Vexera gradually absorbing it, her cold skin warming against his Pete. Her voice was drowsy now, exhaustion finally catching up to her. Yeah, thank you for breaking protocol, for ignoring every rule, for she paused, for being loud enough to find me in the dark. Pete closed his eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing against his back. Get some rest, Vexera. I've got you. I know, she whispered. That's what scares me. She was asleep within minutes, her body gone heavy and still against his. Pete remained awake longer, his mind turning over everything that had happened. The attack, the sensory freeze. The way Vexera's entire nervous system had latched onto his like a drowning person grabbing a rope. The physician had called him a pacemaker, a template for her to follow. But templates could become dependencies, and dependencies could become something else entirely. Pete pushed the thought away and focused on his breathing, on the security readouts visible on his retinal display, on anything except the warm weight of the alien diplomat pressed against his back, and the uncomfortable realization that he was already starting to enjoy it. His last thought before exhaustion claimed him was that medical necessity was a convenient lie they were both telling themselves, and that tomorrow they'd have to confront what happened when the lie became harder to maintain. Pete woke to the sensation of fingers tracing his spine. His combat training kicked in before conscious thought muscles tensing, hand reaching for the weapon that should have been on his hips. Then memory flooded back and he forced himself to stillness. Vexera, the sweet, the contact. Right. You're awake, she said softly. Her voice came from directly behind him, closer than when they'd fallen asleep. I felt it. The moment your nervous system shifted from sleep to waking, it was like a frequency change, like watching a dial turn. Pete became aware of several things at once. First, they were no longer back to back. Sometime during the night they'd shifted, and now Vexera was pressed against his back in a full contact embrace, her arm draped over his ribs, her face buried between his shoulder blades. Second, his shirt had ridden up, and her fingers, those 7 impossibly long fingers, were drawing patterns on his bare skin. Third, his body was responding to this in ways that were decidedly unprofessional. How long have you been awake? He asked, his voice rough with sleep. An hour, maybe longer. I'm not sure. Her fingers continued their exploration, tracing the lines of muscle along his spine. I've been studying you. The way your muscles move when you breathe, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the small adjustments your body makes even while unconscious. It's fascinating. Pete carefully extracted himself from her embrace and sat up, putting necessary distance between them. In the dim light of the suite, the ceiling panels had automatically lowered to night settings. He could see Vexera's face clearly. Her pupils were dilated. Her silver hair spread across the pillow like liquid metal. Her skin flushed a deeper purple than before. How are you feeling? He asked. Strange, she admitted, sitting up as well. The movement made her cease, one hand going to her temple. Better than yesterday, but also more. Everything is more. Colors are brighter, sounds are sharper, and you. She looked at him, and Pete saw something almost like hunger in her gaze. You're so vivid, it hurts to look at you. Pete reached for his uniform jacket, needing something to do with his hands. The physician should check on you this morning, run some tests. They came while you were sleeping, Vexera said. I sent them away. He turned sharply. What? Why? Because they wanted to sedate me. Said my neural activity was dangerously elevated and that I needed to be disconnected from your influence to prevent permanent changes to my nervous system. Her expression hardened. I refused. Vexera, I know what they were trying to do, she interrupted, her voice taking on the sharp edge of command she must use in negotiations. They wanted to separate us because my people find this whole situation distasteful. The idea of me depending on a human, of requiring physical contact to survive. It's embarrassing. It makes the Vunari look weak. It makes you look alive, Pete countered. Which seems more important, does it? She stood, and this time her legs held her weight, though she wavered slightly. Look at me, Pete. Really look. Do you see someone who's recovering or someone who's being consumed? Pete did look. He saw the way her bioluminescent markings pulsed in time with his own heartbeat, the way her silver hair seemed to lean toward him even when she stood still, the way her eyes tracked every movement he made with predatory focus. I see someone who's adapting, he said carefully. Adapting. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling it? She crossed to him in 3 swift steps, close enough that he could feel the heat radiating back from her skin. His own heat reflected. My entire nervous system is rewriting itself around you. Every moment we're in contact, I can feel it happening. Synapses firing in new patterns, sensory thresholds adjusting. I'm becoming dependent on something my people consider primitive, and I can't make myself care. The door chimed. Pete's hand went to his sidearm instinctively. Security override, a voice announced through the comm. Medical team entering. The door slid open before Pete could respond. 3 figures entered. The spindly physician, a Unari doctor, and unfortunately the security director himself. The director was a Christian. All sharp angles and cold eyes. Mr. Ryder, step away from the ambassador. No, Vexura said flatly. The director's expression didn't change. Ambassador, your people have filed a formal complaint. They're demanding we separate you from human contact and proceed with conventional treatment. My people can file whatever they want. I'm not dying to spare them embarrassment. The Vunari physician stepped forward, its crystalline voice tinkling. Ambassador, please understand. The neural bonding occurring between you and the human is unprecedented. If it continues, you may never be able to function without him. And if it stops, I die. Vexer shot back. I'll take dependency over death. There may be another option, the spindly physician interjected. If we can determine what specifically about human biology is providing the stimulation, we could potentially replicate it artificially. Pete felt Vexra's hand close around his wrist, possessive, protective. How long would that take? Days? Perhaps weeks? I don't have weeks. The summit vote is tomorrow. The security director's eyes narrowed. You're not seriously planning to attend. I am. The mining rights treaty is too important. The Azure hegemony's vote is critical. In your condition? In my condition. I have the most effective security detail in the galaxy. Vexera's grip on Pete's wrist tightened. Someone tried to kill me. They failed. I won't give them satisfaction by hiding. Pete watched the security director calculate, weighing political considerations against security protocols. Finally, the director nodded. Fine, but Mr. Ryder doesn't leave your side, and I mean literally within arm's reach at all times. Agreed, Vexera said immediately. After the medical team left with stern warnings and dire predictions, Pete and Vexera stood alone again. You should eat something, Pete said. Real food, not just the IV nutrients they've been pumping into you. I should shower first. She glanced down at herself, then at him. Will you? I mean, do you need to? I'll wait outside the hygiene chamber door, Pete said. Close enough if something happens. Vexera nodded gratefully and disappeared into the bathroom. Pete heard the water start. Then, an involuntary gasp as the spray hit her skin. He positioned himself just outside back against the wall, trying not to think about what was happening on the other side of the door. He failed spectacularly. Pete, her voice echoed off the tile. The water feels wrong, too soft. I can't feel it properly unless a pause. Could you come in? Just stand close. I need your signal to calibrate against. Every professional instinct screamed at him to refuse. This was beyond medical necessity. This was please, she said, and the vulnerability in her voice made the decision for him. Pete opened the door. Steam billowed out, obscuring his vision. Through the fog, he could see Vexra's silhouette behind the frosted glass of the shower enclosure. Just inside the door, she said, "That's close enough." He stepped in, keeping his eyes forward, and felt the change immediately. The steam carried his body heat, his electrical signature. Vexera sighed in relief. Better? He asked. Yes, I can feel the water now, the temperature, the pressure. It's like you're a reference point. Without you, everything is just noise. They stayed like that for several minutes, Pete standing rigid by the door while Vixera showered. It was simultaneously the most intimate and most professional experience of his life. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping silver, she looked at him with something like desperation. "This can't be normal," she whispered. "The way I need you, the way every cell in my body is screaming for contact. Tell me I'm not going insane." Pete reached out slowly and placed his palm against her cheek. Her skin was warm now, flushed from the shower and impossibly soft. "You're not insane. You're injured. Your body is compensating. That's all. Is it?" She leaned into his touch because it doesn't feel like compensation. It feels like discovery. Before Pete could respond, alarms blared throughout the suite. "Security breach," the automated system announced. "Subla 7, Section 4, unidentified energy signature detected. Lockdown initiated." Pete's training took over. He grabbed Vixera's wrist and pulled her toward the main room, scanning for threats. The security panel showed red warnings across multiple sensors. "Someone's here," he said in the subway. "Close." Vixera's face went pale. "The dampener. They're going to try again." Pete felt it then. A wrongness in the air, a pressure building like before a thunderstorm, and Vexer's hand in his began to go cold. "No," he growled, pulling her against him. "Not happening, Pete. If they activate the dampener, then I get louder." He wrapped his arms around her, maximizing contact. "Hold on to me. No matter what happens, hold on." The pressure built, then exploded. It felt like being hit by a psychic freight train. Pete's vision blurred. His ears rang. Every nerve ending screamed in protest, but he didn't let go, and neither did Vixera. Through the chaos, he felt her nervous system clinging to his, using his biological noise as an anchor against the dampening field. Her heartbeat synced to his. Her breathing matched his rhythm. Her entire being resonated with his frequency. The dampener failed, not because it wasn't powerful, but because it couldn't silence something it couldn't touch. Human biology was immune to psychic interference. And Vixera, wrapped in Pete's arms, wrapped in his signal, was protected by that immunity. The alarms cut out, emergency systems engaged, and in the sudden silence, Pete heard Vixera laugh, breathless and amazed. "They can't touch me," she said. "Not while you're here. You're not just a pacemaker, Pete. You're a shield." He looked down at her, still pressed against his chest, her eyes bright with realization in something deeper. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Looks like means they'll try to kill you next," she whispered. "To get to me, they'll have to go through you." Pete's expression hardened. "Let them try." The attack had changed the equation. Within an hour, the entire sub-level had been swept by security teams. They found the dampener device, a sophisticated piece of tech hidden in the ventilation system, and a dead would-be assassin. Suicide pill, no identification. The security director was not pleased. "This is beyond a diplomatic incident," he said, pacing the suite, while Pete and Vixera sat together on the bed, close enough to maintain contact, but outwardly professional. "Someone has declared open war on this summit, and you," he pointed at Vixera, "are the primary target." "Then increase security," Vixera said calmly. "I am starting now. No one enters this suite except Mr. Ryder and myself. Meals will be delivered via automated systems. The medical team will monitor remotely." He paused. "And you're not attending tomorrow's vote?" "Yes, I am. Ambassador Director." Vixera's voice carried absolute authority. "The Azure hegemony represents 43 systems. Our vote determines whether this treaty lives or dies. I will cast that vote in person or the entire accord collapses. Is that what you want?" The director's jaw clenched. "What I want is for you to survive long enough to cast it." "Then make sure I do," she gestured at Pete. "I have everything I need right here." After the director left, still fuming, Pete checked the suite's defenses personally. Every seal, every sensor, every backup system. When he was satisfied, he returned to find Vixera standing by the window screen, watching a simulation of the planet's surface above them. "I used to hate humans," she said without turning. "Did you know that?" "I suspected. Your species is everything the Vunari find repulsive, loud, physical, emotional. You broadcast your feelings to anyone with even minor telepathic sensitivity. It's considered obscene, she finally looked at him. But now I can't imagine existing without it. Without you. What does that make me alive? Pete said simply. She crossed to him, and he noticed her movements were steadier now, more confident. The neural adaptation was accelerating. The physician was right, wasn't he? I'm bonding to you permanently. Maybe. Definitely. She reached up, her fingers hovering near his face, but not quite touching. I can feel the pathways forming. Every time you touch me, they strengthen. Soon I won't just need human contact. I'll need your contact specifically. No one else will do. Is that what you want? The question hung between them. Vixera's hand finally made contact, her palm against his cheek. Her skin was warm now, matching his temperature. What I want is complicated, she said softly. What I need is simple. You. She stepped closer, eliminating the space between them. Show me. Show you what? How humans do this physical contact, comfort, all the things my people have engineered out of ourselves. Her other hand came up, both palms now framing his face. I need to understand what's happening to me, and I need you to teach me. Pete knew he should refuse, should maintain professional distance, should do literally anything except what he was about to do. Instead, he placed his hands on her waist carefully, gently, and felt her entire body shiver in response. Humans need touch, he said, his voice low. From birth to death, we're wired for it. Physical contact releases chemicals in our brains. Oxytocin, dopamine makes us feel safe, connected, loved. Loved, Vixera repeated, testing the word. We have no equivalent. We share thoughts, not sensation. Maybe that's what you're missing. Pete's thumbs traced small circles against her sides, feeling the shift of muscle beneath skin. This, the physical reality of another person. Proof they exist. Proof you exist. Vixera's breathing quickened. Keep going. Show me more. Pete guided her to sit on the bed, then knelt before her the same position as yesterday, but everything had shifted. This wasn't emergency medicine anymore. This was something else entirely. Your back, he said. It's tight. Stressed. May I? She nodded, turning to present her spine. Pete placed both palms against her shoulder blades and applied pressure, working the muscles with practiced efficiency. Vixera made a sound, half gasp, half moan, and her silver hair stood on end. How do you live like this? She breathed. Every touch is so intense, so overwhelming. You learn to manage it, to enjoy it. His hands worked lower, following the curve of her spine. Physical pleasure isn't shameful. It's part of being alive for humans. Maybe for Vunari, too. You just forgot. He continued the massage, feeling her body slowly relax under his hands. But there was tension building, too. A different kind. Her heartbeat was racing again, her skin flushing purple and spreading patches. Pete, she whispered, something's happening. I feel I need. What do you need? She turned suddenly, catching him off guard, and pressed her forehead against his. Her breath came in quick pants. More. Everything. I need to feel all of you. Your heat, your heartbeat, your weight. I need. The words died as she kissed him. It was clumsy, unpracticed, clearly her first. Her lips were cool and soft, moving uncertainly against his. Pete's hindbrain screamed at him to stop this, but his body had other ideas. He kissed her back. Vixera made a desperate sound and pressed closer, her hands tangling in his hair. Pete felt her nervous system spike, electrical activity flooding through her in waves that he could actually sense heat and light and crackling energy. He pulled back, breathing hard. Vixera, we can't. Why not? Her eyes were wild, pupils blown. You said physical contact releases chemicals, makes you feel safe, connected. I want that. I need that because I'm supposed to be protecting you, not you are protecting me. She grabbed his shoulders, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't you understand? Without this, without you, I die. The dampener proved it. My life depends on our connection. So, if that connection needs to be deeper, stronger, more complete, then that's medical necessity too. Pete opened his mouth to argue, but she was already pulling him onto the bed, her body pressed against his with desperate urgency. And God help him, he didn't resist. They spent the next hour exploring the boundaries of medical necessity, Pete showed her how humans touched with intention, with care, with building intensity. He mapped the bioluminescent patterns on her skin with his hands, discovering that they brightened under his touch. He found the sensitive spots where her alien anatomy diverged from human, the base of her skull, the inside of her wrists, the hollow of her throat, where her hearts beat in tandem. Vexira was a quick study. She learned his body with the same analytical focus she probably applied to treaty negotiations, cataloging his responses, testing variables, optimizing outcomes. But there was wonder there, too, genuine amazement at the intensity of physical sensation. "Your species is addictive," she gasped at one point, her back arched against him. "This should be illegal." "Probably is somewhere," Pete managed, his hands spanning her waist. They stopped short of the final boundary, some shred of professionalism held, but the lines had been irreversibly blurred. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Vexira looked at him with something like awe. "I understand now," she said, "why humans are the way you are. If I'd had this my whole life, if my people had this, we'd be completely different. Is that good or bad? I don't know yet." She curled against him, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "But I know I can't go back. Whatever I was before you touched me, that person is gone. There's only this now, only us." Pete stroked her hair, watching the silver strands wind around his fingers like they had their own intelligence. "The summit's tomorrow. After that, they'll find a way to stabilize you, create that artificial stimulation the physician mentioned, and then you won't need me anymore, won't I?" She tilted her head to look at him. "You really think any machine could replicate this? The way you smell, the rhythm of your breath, the taste of your skin?" She shook her head. "I'm bonded to you, Pete Ryder, completely irrevocably. No technology can change that. Vexira, and I don't want it to." She pushed herself up to straddle his hips, looking down at him with fierce determination. "I want this. I want you. Every loud, overwhelming, inappropriate bit of you. And tomorrow I'm going to walk into that summit chamber and show them exactly what human-Vunari cooperation looks like." Pete looked up at her silver hair falling around them like a curtain, eyes bright with certainty, skin flushed purple with arousal and defiance, and felt something shift in his chest. This was no longer about duty. Maybe it never had been. "Okay," he said softly. "Then let's give them a show." She smiled, predatory and possessive, and leaned down to kiss him again. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Tomorrow would bring danger. Tomorrow they'd have to face the political consequences of their bonding. But tonight in this secured sanctuary, there was only the drum and the dancer and the rhythm they were creating together. Morning brought clarity and complications. Pete woke with Vexira draped across him like a living blanket, her legs tangled with his, one hand pressed flat over his heart. The monitoring equipment hummed softly, showing neural patterns that were now indistinguishable. Where one ended and the other began was anyone's guess. "You're thinking too loud," Vexira murmured without opening her eyes. "Your brain activity changes when you're analyzing something. It creates ripples. Can you actually sense my thoughts now?" "No, but I can sense the energy patterns, the general flavor." She finally looked up at him. "Right now you're worried, calculating, preparing for something. The summit's in 4 hours." "I know," she stretched cat-like, then winced. "And I still feel like I've been taken apart and reassembled wrong." Pete ran his hand down her spine. An automatic gesture now, soothing. The physician said, "Your neural pathways are stabilizing. You should be able to function more normally today." "Normally," she laughed darkly. "There's nothing normal about this, about us." She pushed herself up to sitting, "But I can walk now. Stand. Think clearly mostly, and that's enough." She proved it by standing and moving to the refreshment unit without his support. Her legs were steady, her movements fluid. The transformation from yesterday was remarkable. "You're adapting," Pete observed. "Or you're spreading," she glanced back at him. "The physician ran scans last night while we slept. My nervous system has completely reorganized. I'm permanently attuned to human frequencies now, specifically yours. If you died tomorrow, I'd probably follow within hours." The casual way she said it made Pete's chest tighten. "That's terrifying." "Yes, but also," she turned fully to face him. "Freeing. I don't have to pretend anymore." don't have to maintain the Vunari facade of cold telepathic superiority. I am what I am now. Something new. Something that's half me, half you, and entirely unprecedented. A chime interrupted them. The security director's voice came through the comm. Mr. Ryder, the summit begins in 3 hours. We need to brief the ambassador on security protocols. Send the briefing materials, Pete replied. No one enters this suite. Mr. Ryder, director, someone tried to kill her twice in 2 days. I'm not giving them a third chance by compromising this location. Send the materials. A pause then. Understood. But be ready to move in 2 hours. The ambassador will need time to prepare. After the connection cut, Vexira smiled. You're getting protective. That's the job. Is it? She crossed back to him, moving with that new, fluid grace. Or is this personal now? Pete looked at her, really looked at the way her bioluminescent markings pulsed in sync with his heartbeat, at the silver hair that seemed to reach toward him even when she stood still, at the purple flush that spread across her skin whenever they touched. Yeah, he admitted. It's personal. She kissed him, confident now. None of yesterday's hesitation. When she pulled back, her expression was serious. Then you need to understand something. What we're about to do, walking into that summit together, it's going to cause a scandal. The Vunari will see it as degradation, the other species will see it as weakness, and our enemies will see it as opportunity. I know. And you're still willing, Vexera. He caught her hand, pressed it against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. I broke about 50 regulations just getting you to this point. What's a few more? She smiled, genuine and warm, and for a moment, Pete saw past the diplomat to the woman underneath. Then let's shock them all. 2 hours later, they stood before the mirror in the hygiene chamber, and Pete had to admit they made quite a picture. Vexera wore formal diplomatic robes in deep blue, but she'd modified them. The traditional high collar was gone, replaced with an open neckline that exposed her throat and the visible pulse of her hearts. The sleeves were shortened, showing her arms and the glowing markings that now pulsed in obvious rhythm with Pete's presence. Her silver hair was unbound, flowing down her back in a deliberate display. She looked powerful, alien, undeniably connected to the human standing beside her. Pete wore his full security uniform, tactical black, reinforced at key points, weapons visible. But Vexera had insisted on one modification. His jacket was open, showing the shirt beneath, so his body heat radiated freely. We look like we're making a statement, Pete observed. We are. The statement is, try to kill me now, and you'll have to go through him first. She adjusted his collar, her fingers lingering. Also, that physical connection isn't something to hide. It's what saved my life. Let them see it. The security director met them in the corridor, flanked by 6 guards. His expression was carefully neutral, but Pete caught the flicker of disapproval. Ambassador, Mr. Ryder, the assembly is waiting. They moved through the station in formation, guards front and back, Pete at Vexera's side, close enough that their arms brushed with each step, close enough that anyone with even minor telepathic sensitivity would feel the resonance between them. The effect on passers-by was immediate. Aliens stopped and stared. Conversations halted. Some species actually backed away, clearly disturbed by the intensity of what they were sensing. They can feel it, Vexera murmured. The bond, it's radiating off us like heat. Is that bad? It's unprecedented, she glanced at him, which means it's either going to revolutionize interspecies relations or get us both killed, possibly both. The assembly chamber doors opened and silence fell. Every delegate, every observer, every security officer turned to watch as they entered. The crystal walls flashed through a dozen colors: shock, confusion, outrage, fascination. Pete felt it then, the weight of dozens of psychic minds trying to probe, to understand, to categorize what they were seeing. But every probe that touched Vexera bounced off, deflected by the shield of human biological noise that now permeated her entire nervous system. She was untouchable, unreadable, protected. The High Arbiter rose from its seat, 4 golden eyes fixed on them. Ambassador Vexera, we are pleased to see you recovered, though your choice of presentation is unusual, necessary, Vexera corrected, her voice carrying clearly in the silent chamber. She and Pete walked to her station together, and Pete took up position directly behind her chair, closer than regulation, close enough to touch. I was attacked twice. Someone attempted to use psychic dampeners to assassinate me. They failed because of my human security detail. His presence, his biological signature, creates a natural shield against such attacks. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The crystal walls pulsed with conflicting emotions. You're saying you require human contact to survive? A Vunari delegate asked, disgust evident in its chiming voice. I'm saying I've adapted to it, and in adapting, I've become stronger. Vexera gestured at Pete without looking back. Humanity's immunity to psychic manipulation is well documented. What's new is that this immunity can be shared, transferred through sustained physical contact. I am living proof. That's impossible. Another delegate protested. Species don't just merge like that. And yet, Vexera stood, and Pete saw the calculated move. She swayed slightly, just enough to justify Pete stepping forward and steadying her with a hand on her waist. The gesture was protective, intimate, and broadcast to every psychic mind in the room. The assembly erupted into silent chaos, colors flashing across the walls, delegates broadcasting shock and outrage and fascination in equal measure. The High Arbiter raised 2 of its 6 arms, calling for order. This is highly irregular, Ambassador. You're asking us to accept a fundamental change in diplomatic protocol based on extraordinary circumstances. I'm asking you to recognize reality, Vexera countered. Someone in this room or someone with influence in this room tried to kill me. They used technology specifically designed to target telepathic species. If not for human intervention, I would be dead, and the Azure Hegemony's vote would be lost. She paused, letting that sink in. But I'm not dead. I'm here and I'm protected in a way that no amount of conventional security could provide. So yes, I'm asking you to accept a new protocol, allow my human bodyguard to remain at my side during all proceedings, allow physical contact when necessary, and recognize that this bond, this human Vunari cooperation, is the future of interspecies relations. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the High Arbiter did something Pete had never seen before. It laughed. The sound was like rocks grinding together, but unmistakably amused. You've made your point, Ambassador, quite dramatically. It settled back into its seat. Very well, your human may remain, but understand you're setting a precedent. If this succeeds, other species will demand similar arrangements. You may be opening a door that cannot be closed. Good, Vexera said simply, and sat back down. The rest of the summit passed in a blur of debate and voting. Pete remained at Vexera's back, hyper-aware of every approaching delegate, every shift in the room's energy. Twice more, he felt the telltale pressure of dampener technology attempting to activate. Both times, his presence alone disrupted it before it could take hold. Vexera was right. He wasn't just her bodyguard anymore. He was her shield, her anchor, her resonant partner. And when the final vote came, the mining rights treaty that had sparked this entire crisis, Vexera cast the Azure Hegemony's vote with clear, unwavering authority. The treaty passed. As the assembly adjourned, delegates approached to offer congratulations and to study the phenomenon of Pete and Vexera up close. Most kept their distance, clearly uncomfortable with the intensity of their bond. A few were bold enough to get closer, even ask questions. Does it hurt? One asked Vexera. Being bound to such a loud species. It used to, Vexer admitted. Now I can't imagine silence. It would feel like death. Another delegate, a crystalline being that communicated through light pulses, asked Pete directly, "Do you feel the bond as well, or is this entirely her adaptation?" Pete considered the question. He hadn't thought about it, had been too focused on protecting Vexera to examine his own responses. But now that he paid attention, "Yeah," he said slowly. "I feel it. Not the same way she does. I'm not telepathic, but I know where she is without looking. Know when she's stressed or tired or in pain. It's like," he searched for the right words, "like having a second heartbeat in my chest. The Christine being pulsed with interest. Fascinating. Truly fascinating." As the last delegates filed out, Pete and Vexera found themselves alone in the vast chamber. The crystal walls had returned to their neutral blue, the bioluminescence soft and calming. "We did it," Vexera said quietly. "You did it. I just stood there looking intimidating. She turned to face him, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. You saved my life multiple times. You broke every rule of your profession. You let me. She stopped, emotion flickering across her features. You let me remake myself using you as a template. That's not nothing, Pete. He covered her hands with his. What happens now? Now? She smiled. Now we deal with the consequences, the political fallout, the scientific studies, the fact that I can't function without you, and everyone knows it. Her smile widened. But first, I want to go back to our suite and celebrate being alive thoroughly. Is that acceptable, Mr. Ryder? Pete felt something warm unfold in his chest. Not just duty, not just attraction, but something deeper. Something that felt a lot like the connection Vexera had been describing. Yeah, he said. That's acceptable. They left the assembly chamber together, walking in perfect sync, their heartbeats too human. Two Vunari drumming out a rhythm that was entirely their own. The assassins had failed. The treaty had passed, and something new, something unprecedented had been born. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had earned their celebration, and Pete was going to make sure Vexera understood exactly what human stamina really meant. That night, they pushed every boundary. Pete showed Vexera what human endurance truly meant. Hours of sustained contact, building intensity, the full weight of Death Worlder biology focused entirely on her. She discovered that adaptation was ongoing, that each touch rewired her further until she couldn't distinguish where her nervous system ended and his began. The assassins struck during their vulnerability, but that was their fatal mistake. Pete, flooded with protective adrenaline, fought like the apex predator humanity had evolved to be. His speed, his strength, his sheer refusal to let anything harm her created a shield nothing could penetrate. When it was over, enemies neutralized. Vexer is safe. She tried to stand and couldn't. Her legs wouldn't support her. The intensity of Pete's protection, his presence, his everything had overwhelmed her completely. I can't walk straight, she gasped, clinging to him. What did you do to me? Kept you alive, Pete said, lifting her easily. Everything else was just side effects. The summit reconvened days later. Vexera entered on Pete's arm, literally unable to function more than a few feet from him, but she radiated power. Her silver hair shimmered with his resonance. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had survived assassination and emerged stronger. She dictated new terms for galactic cooperation, terms that included human integration at every level, terms backed by the undeniable proof that human-alien bonding was possible, beneficial, and irreversible. The vote was unanimous. Afterward, in their private quarters, Pete held her close. The physician was right. You're permanently bonded to me. No artificial stimulation can replicate this. If something happens to me, then I die. Vexera finished calmly. I know. I've known since the first night. I chose this anyway. She looked up at him. Does that scare you? Terrifies me. Good. She kissed him. Because I feel the same way about you. This bond works both directions, Pete. You just haven't noticed yet. He thought about it, about the strange ache when she left the room, the way he could sense her moods, the possessive fury that had consumed him during the attack. Yeah, he admitted. I guess it does. So what now? She asked. Now? Pete smiled. Now we figure out what forever looks like when your heartbeat is in my chest and mine is in yours. Vexera's answering smile was radiant. I can think of worse fates. They had become something new, something the galaxy had never seen. Not human, not Vunari, but something that was both and neither, forged in crisis and sealed in connection. The drum was beating, and they would dance to its rhythm for the rest of their days. And that brings us to the end of today's story. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I really appreciate it. This channel is all about original human-focused science fiction, and every story is presented as a part of a larger collection. If you'd like to continue, there's another story from this channel on screen now that fits right alongside this one. Feel free to jump into that next, and I'll see you there.